I used to believe family was unbreakable, a bond sealed by blood. But the night I saw my parents sign every last piece of their estate over to my sister, I felt something snap inside me. They told the world I had moved on, that I was fine without it all. What they didn't know was that I had been watching, documenting every betrayal, every secret whispered in the dark. So when the lawyer finally read the real heir's name aloud, the room fell silent. Their laughter froze, their faces drained. And I walked in. The call came at 2:07 a.m., slicing through the silence of my small apartment. I remember staring at the glowing screen, my mother's name flashing in the dark. Every instinct told me to let it ring, to bury my head in the pillow and pretend I hadn't heard. But the guilt that had been stitched into me since childhood wouldn't let me. I swiped to answer, my voice groggy. "Claire, honey, it's your mother. We need your help. Your father's blood pressure is high. The bills are piling up, and your sister can't cover everything by herself. Can you send something tonight?" Her voice cracked at just the right places, rehearsed yet convincing, as if she'd been practicing lines from a script. My chest tightened. I hated how quickly I reached for my laptop, opening the bank app, the numbers glaring back at me. I didn't have much left that month, but that didn't matter. It never mattered when it came to them. I wired the money while she whispered, "You're our rock, Claire. You always have been." I should have hung up feeling proud, but instead I sat in the silence afterward, an emptiness gnawing at me. Something about the call felt staged, hollow. Hours later, scrolling absent-mindedly through social media, I froze. My sister's face filled the screen, smiling in a new designer dress, champagne glass raised. The caption read, "Celebrating life." The timestamp? 15 minutes after my transfer cleared. My stomach turned. That night, I learned the cruelest lesson. Loyalty in my family was a one-way street. But I didn't yet know it was only the beginning. The next weeks were a blur of déjà vu. Requests for money arrived wrapped in different excuses. Medical needs, overdue utilities, emergencies that always seemed to vanish once the funds were sent. I convinced myself I was imagining things, that I was paranoid. After all, wasn't family supposed to need each other? But deep down, a small voice whispered, "You're being played." I started noticing signs I had ignored for years. The family group chat, once buzzing with updates, had gone suspiciously quiet for me. Then one evening, I learned there was another group chat, the real one, where my parents and sister laughed and planned without me. It felt like discovering you'd been written out of your own story. Bills and documents began surfacing with my name on them. Debts I hadn't agreed to, but somehow was responsible for. Each time I confronted them, I was met with laughter or dismissal. "Claire, you're imagining things," my sister said once, her smile sharp as glass. "You always overthink. Don't be so dramatic." That single sentence burrowed under my skin like a parasite. Gaslighting wasn't a term I had known then, but I lived inside it every day. Sometimes I wondered if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too sensitive, too eager to feel betrayed. My parents knew exactly how to twist the knife, reminding me of the times they fed me, clothed me, paid for college. "You owe us, Claire." Family sacrifices for each other. But why did sacrifice always flow in one direction? I remembered being a little girl, proudly holding up my report cards, waiting for applause. My father would glance once, then turn back to the television, My mother would mutter something about my sister being the real star of the family. Back then, I thought they were just tired, distracted. Now I saw it for what it was, the conditioning of a child to expect nothing in return. The final straw came when a hospital bill arrived, addressed to me, except I hadn't been the patient. My sister had been admitted after a minor accident, and somehow my information had been used to cover her expenses. I stared at the paper until the words blurred, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. That night, I sat alone on the floor, surrounded by years of receipts, bank statements, fragments of conversations I had scribbled on scraps of paper. For the first time, I let myself whisper the truth. They don't love me. They use me. The words cracked something open inside me, raw and terrifying. And yet, even as I said it, a small part of me resisted. Because to accept it fully meant rewriting my entire history, admitting that the family I had bled for never saw me as more than a resource. That thought nearly broke me. But what broke me more was the silence from the other side of the phone the next time I didn't answer their call. No frantic follow-up, no real concern, just silence, as if I had ceased to exist when I wasn't giving. It was then I realized I had been nothing more than a wallet with a beating heart. I wanted to believe that was the worst of it, that the lies, the manipulation, the late-night guilt trips were the full extent of their betrayal. I wanted to cling to that hope, foolish as it was, that at least I knew the shape of my enemy. But I didn't, not yet. I had no idea the papers waiting in a lawyer's office would reveal just how disposable I had always been to them. I had no idea the cruelest cut was still to come. I thought I had seen betrayal. But betrayal, I was about to learn, had many layers, and the first cut was only a warning. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between online receipts and spam offers. At first, I almost deleted it, but the subject line froze me. Updated estate documents, confidential. My stomach twisted. It shouldn't have been sent to me. I wasn't supposed to be part of those conversations anymore. Yet there it was, blinking in my inbox like a dare. My fingers trembled as I clicked. The document opened slowly, as if dragging me into a nightmare. The words burned. My parents had officially signed over every asset, property, accounts, investments, to my sister. My name wasn't just absent, it had been erased, like I'd never existed. My vision blurred. My heart hammered so hard, I thought I might faint. I scrolled frantically, looking for a line, a clause, a single shred that acknowledged me. Nothing. Only my sister, glowing in legal ink as the sole heir. Then I noticed an attachment at the bottom of the email. My breath caught as I clicked. It wasn't just the will. It was a scanned loan agreement, my name typed neatly across the top, my signature curling at the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. It was a forgery, a clumsy imitation of my handwriting, used to secure tens of thousands of dollars in debt. My parents hadn't just stolen from me. They had made me complicit in crimes I hadn't even known about. I pushed back from the desk, nausea rolling through me. Betrayal was one thing, but this was annihilation. They hadn't only cut me out, they had marked me as a liability, a scapegoat. They were willing to ruin my future, destroy my reputation, to protect themselves and glorify my sister. I wanted to scream, to drive to their house, to slam the papers in their faces and demand why. But something inside me stilled. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was survival instinct, but a voice whispered, "Not yet." The next day, I sat in my therapist's office, my hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea I couldn't taste. Tears slid down my cheeks unchecked. "I am so tired," I whispered. Tired of rescuing them. Tired of being their crutch, their scapegoat, their invisible child. I am exhausted from loving people who only see me as a resource. For the first time, I didn't feel judged. My therapist leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Then stop rescuing. Let them think you've given up. Let them believe you've walked away. That's when you'll see them most clearly. That's when you'll take your power back." Her words stunned me. I had always imagined fighting fire with fire, storming into battle armed with accusations. But she was offering something else, the power of silence, of patience, of strategy. That night, I replayed her words as I stared at the ceiling in the dark. Let them think you've walked away. Could I do it? Could I become invisible by choice, not by their rejection? Could I withhold the frantic responses, the desperate proofs of my loyalty, and instead watch them unravel from a distance? Slowly, a strange calm began to replace the panic. I imagined their smug smiles, their whispered boasts that Claire had finally moved on. Let them celebrate, let them laugh, let them write me out of the story. Because while they celebrated their victory, I would be writing the ending they could never predict. It was the first time in years I felt a flicker of control, a spark of something that wasn't just survival, but strategy. I gathered the papers, printed copies, slipped them into a folder. Each page felt like a weapon forged from my pain. I began backing up files, saving screenshots, recording every strange message and unexplained transfer. Evidence was no longer just protection, it was ammunition. For once, I wasn't acting out of guilt or desperation. I was acting with purpose, and as I slid the folder into a locked drawer, my heart steadied. My family thought they had broken me. They believed I was the weakest link, the disposable daughter, the perfect victim. They were wrong. From that moment, I wasn't their pawn anymore. I was the one rewriting the game. And the first move would be silence. Silence was my disguise, but in silence I worked. Every call I didn't answer, every message I ignored, gave me more space to build something my family never expected. A case. I began small, almost clumsy at first, recording conversations on my phone. When my parents called, saving every voicemail where they begged for money or twisted guilt like a knife. But soon it became a rhythm, a discipline. I stopped reacting and I started archiving. Late nights turned into research sessions. I learned about cloud backups, how to retrieve deleted files, how to trace financial transfers that were never meant to see daylight. Each discovery was a thread, and I followed them patiently, weaving together a tapestry of deceit. The deeper I went, the more grotesque it became. The first twist hit me hard. A loan application buried in bank records, bearing my name and forged signature. But unlike the one I had seen before, this wasn't small. It was enormous, a 6-figure debt, signed in my name. My father had done it, the handwriting a poor imitation, but enough to pass through the cracks. My chest tightened as I stared at the number. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance, they had shackled me with invisible chains of debt, waiting to strangle me later. I wanted to slam the file shut, but I forced myself to keep reading. Pain was part of the process now. Each forged document, each hidden transaction became fuel. And as I stacked the evidence, I realized something shocking. The perfect proof wasn't in my hands at all. It was in someone else's. It happened by accident. I met my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, at a family gathering I reluctantly attended, playing my role as the quiet, forgotten daughter. He greeted me warmly, almost too warmly, his handshake lingering. Later, when no one was watching, he leaned in just slightly and said, "I know things." His words chilled me. Weeks later, he sent me a single encrypted file with no explanation. When I opened it, my breath stopped. Inside were records, screenshots, emails, transactions, proving years of fraud. He had access to everything. And though he smiled when he handed it over, his eyes were haunted, warning me that what he gave me could destroy them all. It was a dangerous gift. Why would he betray his own wife, his in-laws? Did he pity me, hate them? Or did he have his own agenda? I didn't know. All I knew was that I held a weapon sharper than anything I had gathered on my own. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed people. For years, my family had isolated me, made me believe I was alone. Now I had to unlearn that lie. The first person I reached out to was my best friend from college, someone who had seen my tears in dorm rooms long before the betrayals grew sharp. We met in a cafe, and the moment I slid the folder across the table, my hands shook. She didn't laugh or doubt me. She simply put her hand over mine and whispered, "I believe you." The relief nearly broke me. For once, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was seen. Next was my aunt, my father's sister, who had always been distant, almost estranged. I had grown up hearing whispers about her betrayals. But now I wondered if those were just stories spun to keep me from her. When I finally visited, she looked at me for a long moment before opening her drawer and pulling out her own folder of old letters, contracts, and proof. "They did it to me too," she said quietly. "They took everything I built, and they made me the villain. You're not the first, Claire, but maybe you'll be the last." Her words wrapped around me like a shield. For the first time, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone they had crushed. The final ally came unexpectedly. A soft-spoken bank employee called one evening after I had flagged suspicious activity on an account. His voice was nervous, almost apologetic, but he said, "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I've seen them move money under your name for years. I couldn't say anything before, but I think you deserve to know." That single act of courage added another piece to the puzzle. Each ally wasn't just proof, they were validation. I wasn't insane, I wasn't weak, I was right. Still, even in these moments of solidarity, I let myself pause, to breathe, to cry in the safety of my friend's arms. Vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was the reminder of what I was fighting for. I wasn't just collecting files, I was collecting fragments of myself, piecing together the woman my family had tried to erase. As I closed the folder one night, now overflowing with evidence and testimonies, I realized I was no longer a solitary figure battling shadows. I had a network, a team, people who wanted to see me win. And when I thought of my parents, of my sister, smirking in her new dress bought with my sacrifice, I didn't feel crushed anymore. I felt steady, because for the first time, I knew I wasn't fighting alone. Silence was my camouflage. For months, I let them believe I had vanished from the stage of their lives. When they called, I ignored. When they texted, I gave curt, neutral replies. To the outside world, it looked as if I had accepted my erasure, as if I had surrendered to the role of the forgotten daughter. And that was exactly what I wanted them to believe. I watched from a distance as my parents paraded my sister as their shining heir. Photographs filled social media, family dinners, vacations, parties where my name was never mentioned. Each post was a performance, a carefully staged reminder that they had chosen their favorite and disposed of me. But while they basked in their victory, I was sharpening mine. The timing had to be perfect. Revenge, I learned, is not about rage, but about patience. I chose Christmas Eve, the night the family gathered in their finest clothes, their home glittering with lights, their pride swelling in front of extended relatives. It was also the night the lawyer had scheduled the official reading of the will. They expected applause, not resistance. I arrived quietly, almost invisible among the crowd, my presence drawing only a few raised eyebrows. My sister smirked, a glass of wine in her hand, as if she had already won. My parents stood tall, proud of the empire they had built on my back. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and began. Pages rustled, voices hushed, and in that room, filled with smug expectation, he read the words that shattered their illusion. The rightful heir, written in black ink, was me. My name echoed like a thunderclap, cutting through the room's arrogance. Silence fell heavy. My sister's glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. My father's face drained of color. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. They had expected a coronation, but what they received was an execution of their deceit. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply stood, steady, as though the truth had always belonged to me. And as gasps rippled through the crowd, I felt the power shift. But that was only the beginning, because I had brought more than one revelation. In the days that followed, their retaliation was swift. They launched a smear campaign, painting me as greedy, ungrateful, unstable. They whispered to relatives, posted vague condemnations online, crafted a narrative where they were the martyrs and I was the betrayer. It might have worked once, but not now. This time I was ready. I released the evidence piece by piece, the forged documents, the bank transfers, the recordings of late-night manipulations. I didn't scream or argue. I simply let the truth speak. Screenshots and signatures flooded the light, undeniable, irreversible. People called it receipts don't lie, and the story spread beyond our circle. My family's lies became public record. The first twist came quickly. My sister, cornered by the weight of evidence, broke down in tears. In front of everyone, she pointed at my parents, insisting it was their plan, their orders, that she was only following them. The perfect daughter crumbled into a desperate child, betraying the very parents who had crowned her. The second twist cut deeper. My parents, in turn, turned on her. They accused her of manipulation, of exploiting them, of pushing them into decisions they never wanted. The room that had once been united in their triumph collapsed into chaos, each of them clawing to survive by destroying the others. And I stood there, watching them implode under the weight of their own sins. It should have felt sweet. It should have felt like triumph. But instead, I felt my throat tighten, tears burning behind my eyes. I hadn't wanted this, at least not like this. What I wanted was acknowledgement, respect, love that had never existed. What I got was proof that they were incapable of it. So I wept, not for them, but for myself, for the years lost, for the child who once believed she was loved. The tears weren't weakness, they were release, and as they streamed down my face, I let the pain fall away too. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Exposure was one thing, justice was another. The world had seen their lies unravel, but true accountability was still waiting in the shadows. And I wasn't leaving until the final reckoning arrived. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within weeks, the documents I had released reached the authorities. My parents were summoned for questioning, their spotless facade unraveling in fluorescent-lit rooms, where excuses no longer worked. The forged signatures, the hidden loans, the trail of theft, they couldn't explain it away anymore. For the first time, their power counted for nothing. They weren't doting parents or respected elders. They were suspects. My sister, once radiant in the glow of favoritism, found herself shunned. Friends stopped calling, invitations disappeared. At work, whispers followed her down hallways until she resigned under the weight of humiliation. The same relatives who once praised her as the golden child now crossed the street to avoid her. Reputation, I realized, was as fragile as glass. Once shattered, it never returned to form. I thought that would be enough. Watching them stripped of their illusions, cornered by the consequences they had crafted with their own hands, should have satisfied me. But life has a way of digging deeper. At a family gathering months later, one I attended not out of obligation, but because curiosity drew me there, a cousin I barely remembered stood and cleared her throat. With trembling hands, she unfolded a series of letters. They weren't about me. They were about her, decades earlier, when she too had been exploited, her savings siphoned under promises of family loyalty. Another relative chimed in, then another, until the room became a chorus of stories. It wasn't just me. It had never been just me. My family's pattern stretched back generations, an inheritance of manipulation passed like an heirloom. The revelation hit harder than any betrayal before. This wasn't a single act of cruelty, it was a legacy of it. And somehow I had become the one to break the chain. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my victory tasting strange on my tongue. I had won, yes. I had exposed them, freed myself, reclaimed what was mine. But the emptiness inside me gnawed louder than any triumph. I whispered into the dark, I won, so why do I feel nothing? The answer didn't come right away. It arrived slowly, like dawn creeping into a room. Winning against them could never replace the years I lost waiting for their love. Justice punished them, but it couldn't heal me. That part was mine to do. I spent days alone after that, walking through old neighborhoods, letting memories wash over me. I saw the park bench where I once sat with a scraped knee, waiting for a hug that never came. The classroom where I clutched my report card, hoping for a word of pride. The birthday candles blown out in silence, as if I were invisible. These moments rose like ghosts, demanding to be acknowledged before they could rest. And then, one afternoon, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No name, just my own written on the front. In my father's unmistakable handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single page, dated years ago but never sent. Claire, it began, we never understood you. Your independence frightened us. You didn't need us the way we needed control over you. We told ourselves you were arrogant, ungrateful, but the truth is we were jealous. You lived free while we clung to chains. We hated you for it, and maybe we always will. I read the words again and again until the paper blurred with tears. It wasn't love, not even an apology. It was envy dressed in confession. A strange relief washed over me, not because it excused their cruelty, but because it finally made sense. They hadn't erased me because I was weak. They had erased me because I reminded them of everything they weren't. If it had been you, standing there with that letter in your hands, would you forgive them? Could you? I folded the paper and tucked it away, not as a keepsake, but as proof that their hatred was never truly about me. It was about them, and that was the one thing I would never carry again. As I looked out my window, the city lights stretching endlessly, I whispered to myself, I forgive you, but I will never return to you. Forgiveness was not reconciliation. Forgiveness was freedom, and freedom was mine at last. The first step toward freedom was silence, not the forced silence my family had imposed for years, but the chosen silence of cutting ties. I blocked every number, every account, every desperate attempt to reach me. Their voices had echoed in my head for so long, but now one by one, I shut the doors. Then I moved, a new apartment, a new street, where no one knew my name. I didn't tell them where. I didn't leave breadcrumbs. For the first time in decades, I belonged only to myself. The mornings became sacred. I would brew coffee, crack an egg onto a skillet, and sit by the window as sunlight spilled across the table. The quiet felt foreign at first, like standing in an empty cathedral. But slowly I began to cherish it. A simple breakfast, eaten without the buzz of manipulation or the weight of expectation, felt like luxury. Peace wasn't loud, it was soft, steady, and mine. Then one evening, as I scrolled through my emails, I saw his name, my brother-in-law. My stomach clenched before I even clicked. The message was short, only a few lines. Claire, thank you. You didn't just save yourself. You saved me too. I was drowning in their lies, playing along because I thought I had no choice. You gave me one. I owe you my life. I sat staring at the words, stunned. All this time I had seen him as a bystander, maybe even complicit. But he had been trapped too, bound by the same web of control. By tearing it apart, I had freed him as well. A strange warmth spread through me. Maybe family wasn't defined by blood, but by those who stood with you when truth finally mattered. For the first time in years, I let myself imagine a different kind of family. One not inherited, but chosen. One built from trust, respect, and resilience. I closed my laptop, whispering to myself, maybe I'm not alone after all. The days turned into weeks, and slowly I began to build. I took the money I had reclaimed and invested it into a small business. Something that had always been a dream buried under obligation. With every decision, every step forward, I felt lighter. Customers came, word spread, and before long, the venture grew beyond what I had dared to hope. But it wasn't just about money, it was about voice. I began sharing my story online, cautiously at first, then boldly. To my surprise, people listened. Strangers messaged me with their own tales of toxic families, of silent suffering. Hashtags formed. No contact movement. Your receipts don't lie. And suddenly, I wasn't a lone survivor. I was part of a wave. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that tried to erase me had inadvertently made me a voice for thousands. My pain had become power, not because I clung to bitterness, but because I refused to let it define me anymore. There was a moment, standing in front of a small audience at a community event, telling my story, when I looked out and saw tears in other people's eyes. And instead of rage or triumph, I felt compassion. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted liberation. Not just for me, But for them, that was the twist I hadn't expected. That my victory wouldn't end with their downfall, but with my choice to rise without hatred. I didn't hand them forgiveness as a gift. I claimed it for myself, so their chains could never bind me again. In time, love found its way back into my life, not the desperate kind that begged to be seen, but the quiet, steady kind that grew from mutual respect. I built friendships, partnerships, and eventually, something close to a new family. A family I chose, a family that chose me back. I am not a cold warrior. I am not a statue carved from pain. I am a woman who bled, who broke, who rebuilt, and who still feels, still cries, still hopes. When I look at the mirror now, I no longer see the forgotten daughter. I see someone who took the ashes of betrayal and built a future brighter than anything her past could imagine. I didn't just win back the inheritance. I didn't just expose the lies. I took back myself, and that is the kind of victory no one can ever take away again.